Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. It is 5-year battle PG Wodehouse. Let's get into it. So I've done 5-year battles previously for Agatha Christie and Stephen King. 5-year battle is basically I take 5-year period that they're publishing in and I rank those books that they publish in those years. I pick authors like Agatha Christie, Stephen King, and P.G. Wodehouse because they're very prolific writers, so I have books to compare. I wouldn't do one like on Thomas Harris, who published like every 7 years or so. I do the 5-year segments, pick the best book from each segment, and then at the end of it, I do a tournament to battle all those books against each other and then pick an ultimate winner. P.G. Wodehouse is a little bit different than Stephen King and Agatha Christie in a couple of ways. One, I haven't read all of P.G. Wodehouse yet. I've read 85%, possibly. I'm close. I will be there by the time we're finished. And I'm going to be publishing this one every 2 weeks instead of every week, so I have a little bit of time. The second way it's going to be different is I'm not going to do it chronologically, or I am going to do chronologically, except probably for one 5-year period, which just happens to be the next one, 1907 through 1911, because that has, I believe, 7 books, 4 of which I have not read yet. Now, to be fair, these 4 books are easily available. They're short, but I also don't look forward to them because some of them are school stories, which we will talk about in this section, which is 1902 through 1906. A lot of school stories. Also, I think from my experience with P.G. Wodehouse, Wodehouse doesn't really find his comic footing until at least 1906, which we'll talk about. The ones 1902 through 1905, and generally, I don't like the school stories. Again, I haven't read them all. There are ones from 1907 through 1911 that I haven't finished, some that I have, but generally, if there's a type of Wodehouse story, school story is usually at the bottom of the list of the ones I like. I like the golf ones better, and I hate golf. But the golf stories are fun, even though they talk about stuff I don't understand. I have to keep looking up every time what a nibbler is. I know it's a type of club, but I can't remember which one is it. Is it the putter? Is it the birdie? I don't know. An iron birdie. That's a shot, not a club. So we're going to go ahead and get into the books for 1902 through 1906. Wodehouse's first book is The Pot Hunters. It's a school story. It's set at St. Austin's, and it contains lots of characters. So many characters. First, it's a short book. It's not a long book at all, but you get introduced to like many characters in the first chapter. There's what spends a lot of time talking about boxing, and then like one of those characters doesn't appear again in the novel. I believe he has a letter later in the novel, but basically the character that we start with, or one of the 2 characters we start with, doesn't really play a part in the novel. Set at school, somebody breaks into the school and steals some pots, basically some like championship metal kind of pot thing. And there's a character in there who also happens to have snuck into the same area these were stolen from to get something. He didn't steal them, but he could be accused of it. And it's just very complicated. There's a detective appears in it, and the detective finds out who did it. And spoiler alert, it's somebody that's not been mentioned at all in the book before. I do like The headmaster was an interesting character. I like the detective as a character, although I don't feel he was necessary. I don't really connect with any of the other characters because there's not really one main character, and characters will just disappear for chapters, don't really remember what they were doing. Some of the names are similar, so I didn't enjoy it. I'm glad that my my first introduction to Woodhouse was Jeeves and Wooster. And then when I started to read these in 2022, I read all the Jeeves and Wooster and Blandings Castle before I started going into the rest of Woodhouse overall. This one is going to be number one for right now. We will see if any books topple it. A Prefect's Uncle, published in 1903, another school story. I read this maybe a year ago. Can't remember much about it except there's a prefect. Can't remember his name. He has a nephew that's coming to school who basically makes life difficult for him. We have a bit more of a main character with the prefect, but still just bunch of different characters. The next book published in 1903 is The Tales of St. Austin's. It's a short story collection. It's a short story collection of school stories. So if you didn't enjoy the school story novels, which I did not, I I don't think you're going to enjoy the school stories. I'm going to be completely open about it. I read this, don't really remember anything about it. I didn't really remember anything about it after I read it. I think generally, except for a few exceptions, Woodhouse stories usually pale compared to Woodhouse novels. Now, you can find gems among Jeeves and Wooster stories, and there are some of the golf stories I really enjoy. Mr. Molyneux, but generally, stories aren't as good as the novels. So I'm going to rank this under A Prefect's Uncle. The Gold Bat, published in 1904. I read this one recently, like last 3 months or so. The Gold Bat is actually basically a small little uh, cricket bat that is given to people, uh, kind of a distinguishing thing. And one of the characters, I forget to mention, it's a school story. One of the characters borrows it and then loses it, happens to lose it at a place where a prominent statue has been tarred and feathered. So the owner of the gold bat worries about being accused of doing this. And it's somewhat similar plot to the pot hunters. I think that it's a little bit better than the pot hunters. I don't enjoy the plot at all. I don't enjoy many of the characters, but I think it does narrow down the cast of characters a bit, which I enjoy. I think these books in this first 5 year period, a lot of it is just Woodhouse just going for broke, writing about what he likes. Because in 1902 or so, he was in his early 20s, I believe. He was still playing these sports that he writes about, and I failed. It doesn't come up as much in these books, but in a lot of his books, he goes into a lot of details about what happens in the sports. And these are sports that, one, sometimes are sports that I'm not used to at all, for cricket for one. and two, talked about in a way that they were talked back in the early 20th century in England, just like nibblers or niblets for golf. Some of the terms used here I don't understand for rugby, cricket, football, but I do think that I am going to put the gold bat above the pot hunters. Now, I think I will be doing one of my podcasts with my daughter Robin on this one sometime this year. I may change my mind, and that is something I have to warn you about. My opinions about books tend to shift a little, not greatly. This is not a good book. I'm not going to say, hey, this is the best book during this 5 year period because I kind of pick them while I'm doing it, but I already know what the top book in this 5 year period is. It's going to be number one for right now. It's not going to be number one at the end. The next book, published in 1905, I believe, is William Tell Told Again, which is the tale of William Tell told again. It's basically you get one of those fairy tales told in a modern way kind of thing. And that's what this is it's Wodehouse's version of the William Tell story. If you don't know what the William Tell story is, apple on the head, father shooting it off the kid's head. And there's much more to the story, Wodehouse's version of the story, than that, but it is still a very short book. I didn't really enjoy it. I I think if Woodhouse had written it 20 years down the road when he was fully in his comic prime, it might have been interesting. I think he hadn't really mastered all the tools just yet. So I am actually going to put this above Tales of St. Austin's, but that's it. And the next book, also published in 1905, is The Head of K's. K's is the name of a house. K is a schoolmaster there. The houses are named after the schoolmasters. K's house has a discipline problem that's mainly due to K himself, but he blames, whoever he has as the head boy and the prefects and stuff. So they're often getting replaced. And a boy from another house is taken in there and put in charge, which isn't seen well by the boys who are already at K's or by his friend who should have been taking over but was not selected. And there's, you got some animosity there. You got somebody who's trying to put a kink in the works. I think this was better plotted than previous school stories. I still don't like it, but better plotted. Characters made more sense. Mainly, you had a main character, which I enjoyed because we didn't have those before. So this one is actually going to be number one for now. And our last book, published in 1906, it is what I would say it's the book that transitions Woodhouse a little bit from what he was doing before to what he's going to be doing in the future. He's going to be writing school stories for a few more years, but I think this is what points him towards what we remember him as. It is Love Among the Chickens, not a school story. It is the first appearance of the character Eucridge, who is one of Woodhouse's favorite characters, appears in 1906 and then appears in a story like in the 1960s. So, like a 60 plus year span of appearances. Unless you do some magic numbers with the Blandings Castle novels, it's the longest span of characters. Woodhouse has an unfinished novel that was published, even though it was non-finished. If you select that, then the Blandings Castle characters have a longer span, but if you don't, it's Eucrid. Eucrid and his friend Jeremy Garnett start a chicken farm. Eucrid starts it, he kind of pulls Jeremy Garnett into it. It's also the first real appearance of a romance in a Wodehouse novel, and it's the first real appearance of his use of his comic voice in a novel. It's not the most successful Wodehouse novel, but it is the novel that shows you what Wodehouse will become. That's going to make this the number one book for the first 5 year period, 1902 through 1906. So, book number 7 is The Tales of St. Austin's. Book number 6 is William Tell Told Again. Book number 5 is A Prefect's Uncle. Book number 4 is The Pot Hunters. Book number 3 is The Gold Bat. Book number 2 is The Headache Haze. And our top book of the years 1902 through 1906 is Love Among the Chickens. Now, as I've said, next time, the years 1907 through 1911, I've not finished all the books for that yet. So that one is going to happen in the future. Whenever I finish these books. I do believe that at the rate I'm doing these and looking at the books that I have finished and those that I have to finish, except for that 5 year period, I should be able to do all the other 5 year periods in order and then just put the 1907 through 1911 whenever I finish them. So the next video will be 1912 through 1916, where pretty much not even looking at the list of books. I have it over there somewhere, but I can't see it because I'm not wearing my glasses. But I guarantee you, pretty much every book 1912 through 1916 is better than every book in 1902 to 1906. And if it's not, then I will apologize then, but pretty sure it is. And if it's not, I will probably put a note right here letting you know, yeah, I messed up. So that's it for this week. Please like and subscribe, leave a comment. Check out our podcast. I will link that in the description. And I'll talk to you next time.